Ladies and gentlemen, when Israel struck Iran's nuclear sites, it wasn't just a military maneuver. It was a message etched in steel and precision, a declaration that survival is not up for negotiation. This was not the beginning of a war, but the awakening of a resolve that had been quietly building beneath the surface for years. The world saw flames, but those with visions saw fire, born of discipline, intelligence, and unity. When words fail and diplomacy drags into dead ends, the only language that remains is action. Israel's strike on Iran's nuclear facilities wasn't just a military operation. It was a message written in the clearest, most undeniable terms. It bypassed all the political noise, the delayed negotiations, the half-hearted resolutions, and instead sent a signal the entire world could understand. We are not waiting for danger to become disaster. Action in this moment said more than any press release, more than any international debate, more than any warning ever could. It declared that red lines mean something, that threats are taken seriously, and that survival will never be left to chance. When Israel acted, it wasn't simply retaliating or posturing. It was setting the terms of engagement. It was declaring that it would not play defense in a game where the cost of delay is destruction. Action becomes the message when every other method has failed to produce clarity. Israel's response forced the world to pay attention, not to the opinions swirling around the issue, but to the undeniable fact that it is willing to protect itself with force, precision, and commitment. This kind of message resonates deeper than rhetoric. It shakes assumptions, disrupts complacency, and alters calculation. It tells adversaries that Israel is not a nation of waiting hearts, but of willing hands. Action has a way of drawing lines in the sand that no amount of discussion ever could. It defines what will and will not be tolerated. And while others may hesitate, try to balance risks, or hope that dangerous situations will resolve on their own, action refuses to leave anything to luck. It puts intention into motion. It tells the enemy that this is no bluff, no warning that will fade, no deterrent that depends on others. Action eliminates ambiguity. It turns a promise into a reality. Israel's operation was not just a strike. It was the living proof of a doctrine long stated, but now fully demonstrated. And beyond the geopolitical impact, this moment serves as a powerful life lesson. There are times when your voice won't be heard until it's backed by movement. When people dismiss your value, when systems overlook your existence, when waiting becomes suffocating, you don't ask for space, you claim it through action. Not reckless, not reactionary, but decisive, grounded, and intentional. Action, more than talk, forces the world to acknowledge your seriousness. It shifts you from being a passive observer to a powerful participant in your own future. Strength is never sudden. It doesn't appear out of nowhere, nor is it the product of mere desire. It is built layer by layer, moment by moment, through the quiet discipline that few see and even fewer appreciate. Israel's ability to carry out precision strikes against Iran's nuclear sites was not a spontaneous act of aggression. It was the culmination of decades of preparation, intelligence gathering, strategic patience, and unwavering focus. Strength like that is forged in silence, in laboratories, in strategy rooms, and in relentless training grounds where excellence is not a choice but a standard. When people look at the surface of an event, they often see the result, but miss the process. They see the strike, the headlines, the satellite footage, and they talk about shock and surprise. But what they do not see is the years spent analyzing targets, building intelligence networks, testing technology, simulating operations, and preparing the human mind for exact execution under pressure. That kind of preparation is not glamorous, it's not loud, it doesn't trend, but it is where real power lives. Every stronghold begins as a blueprint. Every mission starts with a commitment. And over time, with relentless effort, those blueprints become reality. Israel's strength is not only technological, it is psychological. It is the ability to endure global scrutiny, to navigate complex alliances, and to act decisively when the stakes are highest. That level of strength doesn't come from having better weapons. It comes from having a better understanding of time. It comes from knowing that power isn't just about what you can do today. It's about what you've built yourself up to be able to do when the time finally comes. And when that moment arrives, the years of silent preparation reveal their value. Strength is tested in public, but built in private. It is formed not when everything is going right, but when doubts are loud and distractions are tempting. The mission against Iran's nuclear facilities was not a show of force. It was the unveiling of a system that had been evolving over years. The aircraft, the routes, the intelligence, the decision-making, all of it was sharpened in the quiet, long before it echoed across headlines. And in life, the same truth applies. Whether it's building your future, protecting your peace, or preparing for your own defining moment, true strength will not show itself until it is needed. And when it is, it will speak for itself. Resolve is not a mood. It is not something that rises and falls with the tide of circumstances. It is a decision planted deep in the soul, unmoved by opinion, unshaken by fear. The power of resolve is what separates those who dream from those who do. It is the invisible force that drives a nation, like Israel, to act when others hesitate, to strike when the threat grows too large, and to hold firm even when the world questions its motives. Resolve is not about rage or reaction. It is about clarity, a clear understanding of what must be protected, what cannot be compromised, and what is worth any cost to defend. Israel's strike on Iran's nuclear program wasn't just a show of strength. It was a display of unshakable resolve. For years, the international community negotiated, delayed, and hoped that diplomacy alone would keep the threat at bay. But Israel understood something vital. Hope is not a strategy. Resolve begins where wishful thinking ends. It is the moment a nation stops waiting for the world to act and instead takes its future into its own hands. That kind of determination doesn't come from politics. It comes from the heart. It comes from a people who have known what it means to be targeted, who carry the weight of history, and who vow never again to stand idly by in the face of danger. What makes resolve powerful is its endurance. It doesn't burn out in a day. It doesn't get weaker with criticism. In fact, the more pressure it faces, the stronger it becomes. It turns opposition into focus. It transforms doubt into fuel. And when faced with impossible odds, it says, we do not surrender, we prepare. That is why resolve is feared by enemies. It cannot be reasoned away. It cannot be intimidated, and it will not retreat. It is the fire that keeps burning long after the battle is over. In our own lives, resolve is what carries us when motivation fails. It is the reason we keep showing up, keep fighting, keep moving forward when the world says, give up. You don't need to shout your resolve. You need only to live it. Because when resolve meets action, the impossible becomes inevitable. When resolve is tested, it reveals its true power, not in comfort, but in conflict, not in peace, but in prayer. And those who walk with resolve carry a force within them that no weapon can match, no enemy can crush, and no fear can control. When a nation like Israel takes bold, decisive action in the face of overwhelming threat, it sends a signal that echoes far beyond geopolitics. It becomes a mirror, a lesson, and an invitation for every individual watching from a distance to reflect on their own life. Because at its core, this isn't just about military strength or strategic precision. It's about what happens when clarity meets courage. When someone or something says, "Enough waiting, now we move." And that principle applies not just on the battlefield, but in the everyday wars we all face within our minds, our hearts, and our futures. Inspiration doesn't always come from speeches or books. Sometimes it comes from watching a small country stand tall when others expected it to kneel. It comes from witnessing people take charge of their destiny instead of leaving it in someone else's hands. That inspiration is powerful not because of the scale of the action, but because of the truth behind it. If they can act under pressure, under threat, with the world watching and judging, then what excuse do we have for standing still in our own lives? Everyone faces moments when they are underestimated, when the voices around them say, "Wait your turn, be quiet, play safe." But greatness does not wait for permission. It does not bow to the fear of being misunderstood. It moves, it acts, and that's the lesson. When your dreams are under threat, when your worth is questioned, when your goals feel like targets, your next move cannot be silence. It must be a decision, an action, a refusal to surrender. Watching Israel's boldness can spark something deeply personal, not because we all face nuclear threats, but because we all face moments when we must choose whether to defend what matters or let it be dismantled. Inspiration turns to action the moment we stop asking the world to make space for us and instead create it for ourselves. The courage to act in uncertain times is not reserved for the powerful. It lives inside the quiet, the overlooked, the doubted. And like Israel, when pushed too far, that quiet becomes a roar. Each of us has a mission. Maybe not one that makes headlines, but one that shapes our legacy. And the time to wait has ended, not because the world is ready, but because we are. The strike we must make is not with missiles, but with movement. Movement toward purpose, identity, and unapologetic strength. Survival in its truest form is never guaranteed by weapons alone. No matter how advanced the arsenal, how precise the technology, or how vast the stockpiles, without the will to endure, to rise, to resist, those weapons become ornaments of illusion. What separates nations and individuals who thrive under threat from those who crumble is not firepower, it is fire within. It is the unyielding belief that giving up is not an option, that defeat is not a destination, and that life, purpose, and dignity are worth fighting for. Weapons can defend borders, but only willpower defends identity. In the case of Israel, the world has witnessed a nation constantly surrounded by hostility, by threats, by existential danger. Yet time and time again, it stands, not because it has the strongest weapons, but because it has cultivated one of the strongest wills. It refuses to disappear. It refuses to be erased. And that refusal is its real shield. Its enemies may calculate missile ranges and troop counts, but what they cannot quantify is the strength of a people who have made survival a daily mindset, not a distant hope. That kind of will is forged in hardship. It comes from history, from memory, from lessons carved in pain and struggle. It teaches that safety is not a gift. It is earned through sacrifice. It is protected by vigilance, sustained by unity, and powered by an inner flame that weapons cannot replicate. The will to survive gives purpose to every strategy, discipline to every action, and endurance in every trial. It is the reason a nation acts swiftly when danger rises, not because it seeks war, but because it understands what is at stake if it does not. In the same way, individuals are armed with tools, skills, and opportunities, but without willpower, without that inner voice that says you will not fall today, all those tools remain unused. And if we in the West assert too much of that power, if that power, survival in a hostile world, whether in politics, relationships, careers, or personal struggles, is granted not to the strongest on paper, but to the strongest in spirit. The ability to keep going when the odds are against you, to keep believing when fear surrounds you, is more powerful than any shield or sword. True survival comes from within, from the decision to keep standing, to keep moving, to keep building, even when destruction seems inevitable. The real weapon is the heart that refuses to break, the soul that refuses to quit, and the will that says, I will not